This week we got the first Labour budget in 14 years, and predictably it's all about spending more, borrowing more, and taxing more. Here's a rapid rundown of what was in the budget, why Labour says it's essential, and yes, we will talk about the removal of agricultural property relief. I've missed doing farm theory news, to be honest. I'm very glad it's back. And man, do we have a lot to talk about today. So first up, what was in the budget? Well, there was no increase in personal tax, except there kind of was because employers' NIC was increased, which is going to raise £25 billion per year. Fuel duty was unchanged. There is a few government departments which are going to see a 2% budget cut. There was a claim that they were going to try and tackle tax avoidance and fraud. I'll believe that when I see it. And there was also an increase on capital gains tax. Labour sold this budget as a tax the rich budget, but in reality, everyone is going to pay. The UK now shoulders the highest tax burden since 1948. And this £40 billion tax rise represents the biggest rise since 1993. So this is a truly exceptional budget. Exceptionally bad, but we'll get to that in a minute. And it's not just about taxing more. Labour also plans to borrow more. And for anyone who hasn't followed government financial policy for a few years, you might want to brace yourself for this bit. Because the UK is basically insolvent. Labour plans to borrow an additional £28 billion per year to spend on what they consider their priorities. More on their priorities shortly. This will bring government borrowing this year to almost £150 billion. It is mental to get away with this stuff. The annual government tax take is only around 1 trillion. Imagine borrowing 15% of your income every year when you're already so laden with debt that you can't afford to make any repayments, and instead you are just covering the interest. Well, that's the situation that the UK finds itself in. Absolutely mental. Government debt is already 2.8 trillion. 2.8 trillion! And the UK government is set to blow an astonishing £110 billion of our money on interest payments alone in the next year. Them interest payments are also now rising because the interest rates that the government has to pay are rising because they want to borrow more, and it's such an idiotic budget. Oh, this stuff really riles me up. I'm not sure if that's obvious. Debt interest payments are now the 4th largest expense for the UK government, just behind education, and it has increased by 50% since 2010. Our country is sinking under the debt burden, and our government has decided the solution is to borrow more money. How are these people so dumb? I have a real thing for government spending and government policy and macroeconomics, and I just don't understand how these people are so stupid. Right, I need to calm down. This next section is not going to help me calm down. Before we dive into the removal of agricultural property relief, let's take 1 minute to highlight where Labour plans to spend all of this extra money. And a spoiler, it's in areas which are just begging to be cut from the budget entirely. When I read this list out, you're honestly not going to believe it. It is mind-boggling that these are the government spending commitments when they are basically insolvent and taxing their population into oblivion just to pay for this stuff. Anyway, I will calm down. Let's go through the list. All of these, by the way, when I become Prime Minister, I am cutting. 28.5 billion over 5 years for carbon capture. A useless vanity project that is going to make zero difference to the lives of any citizen in the UK. 10 billion for clean energy, which is really just going to funnel money to the profits of the giant green energy corporations. Does anyone remember when they used to say cheap green energy? And now they've just dropped the cheap and it's just green energy? Haven't heard that in a long time. 11.6 billion for overseas climate aid. Possibly the stupidest allocation of our money yet. Why are we paying for other countries' energy projects? And the final one I mention is the 4.3 billion pounds we're spending and the final one I'll mention is the 4.3 billion we are spending every year to house people who arrive here illegally. I know it's controversial, but when it's costing £41,000 per person per year, and you're taxing people who earn less to pay for that, who are actually citizens of the country, that is so wrong. If this doesn't give you a sense of just how out of touch the people making these decisions are, nothing else will. And it really helps explain how these idiots who are running our country came to the conclusion that abolishing agricultural property relief to raise under £1 billion a year was a good idea. Okay, so let's get into it. Agricultural property relief. How is it going to affect farming? I'll be honest, it has taken me a few days to come to a definite opinion on this. And when I first heard the announcement, I wasn't really sure what to think. And what's really shifted my opinion on it has been other farmers on social media. I have been truly inspired over the last few days from so many people posting videos about it. Some of them are absolutely fantastic. And it has really genuinely inspired me to want to fight this and to want to make a difference. And when it was first announced in the budget, I sort of resigned myself to the fact that this was going to happen and that farmers couldn't stop it. But having heard from so many people on social media, they have really made me convinced that we can stop this. And I'm at the point now where I think social media has effectively replaced our unions as the voice of farming and as the effective tool to lobby for change. I've kind of taken a tangent here, but I think it is a very important tangent. Headlines like this in today's newspapers are because of social media. We have front pages like this in today's newspapers, not because of our farming unions, but because of social media. I am a huge Elon Musk fan, I'm sure a lot of you know that, and the fact that he has commented on this situation, that he knows what's happening in the UK and actually understands what's happening to UK farmers means an awful lot. And whether you hate Elon Musk or you love him, it genuinely makes a difference when you're getting headlines like this. In my opinion, the man's a hero. That was a tangent, but it was an important tangent. My opinion, my willingness to put up a fight to this has been fundamentally changed by being inspired by individuals on social media. And farming for a very long time has lacked any kind of inspirational leadership. We have had pathetic leadership. That's my opinion. Don't get mad at me. I'm allowed an opinion. Anyway, back to the point. What does the abolition of agricultural property relief actually mean for a family farm like ours? Well, my farm is probably worth around £4 to £5 million. That is a capital asset. I never see any of that money. It has been passed down through 4 generations. And under the new rules, I would owe a 20% tax on that £4 million asset if my father died and I inherited the farm. That's going to be a tax bill of somewhere between £600,000 and £800,000. And now here's the issue with agriculture, which is maybe different from other industries that have businesses valued at 4 or 5 million. Agriculture does not generate a large amount of profit for the amount of capital invested. The technical term is return on capital, and the return on capital in farming is almost non-existent, which means to pay that tax bill, the only option for almost all farmers would be to sell assets. And if every time you pass on a farm you have to sell 20% of your farm, you're not going to have a farm very, very quickly. And I know for people outside of agriculture that might sound like a strange statement. You might think it's only 20%, but if you get rid of 20% of a farm business, it essentially means the end of that business. This is why people are describing this inheritance tax change as the end of family farming in the UK. And there absolutely will be a majority of farmers who can work around this tax. However, there is a significant minority who will not be able to work around it, who will be caught by this tax, and who will essentially be put out of business because of it. All of this destruction to family farming in the UK to raise a pittance of money, which the government could raise so much easier by cutting some of their stupid vanity project spending goals. And I think farmers do need to stick together on this. And this is the part where I've been inspired by social media. Because for me personally, this tax change isn't going to impact me until I'm in my 50s and 60s and looking to pass the farm on to my son. However, that is not true of all farmers, and farmers need to stand up for each other. There is one more point in this which I will mention, and that is, if the government gets away with this, if the government can pass this tax rise on to farmers and get it through, they will come back again and try with something else. So even if you're not personally affected by the change to agricultural property relief, I do think you need to fight for it, because if they get away with this, they'll try something else. I got very energized in that video, didn't I? I have a real issue with seeing the decline in our country. Like, it genuinely depresses me. Like, the state of politics depresses me. But that's for another video. I will end this video by saying this. The changes to agricultural property relief are not a disaster for the vast majority of UK farmers. But for some family farms, the changes are genuinely the end of a generational business. And as a group, as a collective, we all need to stand against that. Anyway, that's it for Farm Theory News this week. Thank you all so much for watching. I actually had recorded a full video on this on Thursday, and my opinion has shifted so much, I've decided to re-record the whole thing this morning. And it's taken a very different tone this morning, but I know this is the video that I should make, because this is the video that I genuinely feel. Whereas the video I recorded on Thursday was me being more careful about what I said and trying to appear more relaxed about it all. But I'm not relaxed about it all. I am so fed up with bad government decisions. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please do give it a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And any comments, good or bad, stick them down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.
Farm Theory News, we're bringing the facts. No paywalls here, no forced BBC tax. Honest and clear, no spin, no disguise. This is where legacy needed dies. Farm Theory News, where the truth grows tall. Out in the fields, we're breaking it all. No filters, no fees, no mainstream spin. This is Farm News Uncut.